Hi everyone, thanks for coming. My name is Broderick. I'm here with Chaveli. We're both from the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, or VCGI, which is the state's sort of mapping spatial GIS group. So today we're going to talk about the Vermont Land Survey Library. We're going to go into a few other topics kind of to introduce you to that, but that is our main focus for today. And we'll also have some time for questions at the end. So just a little bit of background on VCGI. Hopefully it's somewhat familiar to some of you, but if not, again, we're the state's sort of geospatial group. We deal primarily with 3 data programs. So the first is imagery. That's like a snapshot of the surface of the Earth every year, ideally at a high resolution, usually within a meter or so. So that's one program. The second is the LiDAR and elevation program. So that's dealing with anything topography or relief related. So contour data, slopes, aspect, anything kind of physical geography. And then the last is the parcel program and boundaries. And that's what Chaveli and I mostly work in. And that is the more kind of political geography, thinking about like lines you might draw on a map, polygons, points, and other lines. So this image is just showing where we are today at Killington. It's just highlighting all 3 programs in one shot. We can see the imagery, of course. The black lines represent the parcel boundaries, and then the relief as well. So that's just a quick background on VCGI. As I mentioned, Chaveli and I mostly work with the parcel and boundaries program. And just to give some background on that, the parcel project was something I hope some of you are familiar with as well. It was a 3-year effort from 2017 through 2019 to bring every town in the state up to a standardized parcel data set. So everything in the same format and something that was publicly and freely accessible. Before that, towns were very fragmented in how they were maintaining and updating their parcel data sets. So this was sort of meant to bring everyone up to speed. It was state and federally funded. And we just like to highlight that this is something that people have seen a lot of value in even before all of this happened. This document is from the 1990s and is again highlighting that there are a lot of uses for parcel data, especially to have them all standardized and available. Some of the uses that we see are aiding fair and accurate taxation, land and resource conservation, managing public services and resources, real estate development, and emergency response. So you can imagine something like this summer where we had all this flooding, having a complete data set for every town statewide really came in handy for people that needed parcel information, which would hopefully inform accessibility to certain areas and similar applications. So all this to say, since the parcel project ended in 2020, we have now transitioned to the parcel program, which is where each town is ultimately responsible for maintaining and updating their data, and we'll go through a few ways of how that's done. But that is then provided to us, and then we will join it to the annual grant list from TAX and publish it and make it available. So now we're sort of in the maintenance phase. VCGI acts as just like the compiler and the publisher of the data, but we're not actively sourcing it, or we're not actively creating it ourselves. That is on the responsibility of the town. So we have 3 main types of towns and how they are maintaining their data. Again, hopefully some of this is familiar. You've probably seen this slide before if you've heard us talk. But the main way most towns, 85%, are maintaining their data is through a mapping vendor. So CAI is here today. They're a very popular vendor for the state. A lot of towns work with them. There are others. So in these cases, the town will work with that vendor. The vendor will make updates to the parcel geometry, provide that geometry to us, which we will then review, join to the grant list, and publish. So that's the most common workflow. The second is only about 4% of towns, but these are towns that can do the job of the vendor themselves. So they have either the resources, the knowledge, the capacity, the technology to make those geometry updates on their own. And then similar, they will will submit it to us, we review it, we publish it. The last type is sort of what we're going to transition into today, and these are towns that do not have capacity to update their own parcels, so either they don't have the resources, either financially or technologically or otherwise, and this is the third type. It makes up makes up 11% of towns. So in these cases, we will often try to work with the town. We'll reach out to establish a point of contact, check in with them, see how things are going, and if we can help in any way. And then our default procedure after that is to check the land survey library. So we're going to go into a lot about how that works, and we'll see why there may be some limitations with that. But for these kind of towns that don't have their own capacity or a vendor, that is how they are being updated on our end. Okay, so quickly, this is just a snapshot of parcel status across the state. So the map on the left, we can see anything that's in the darkest green color. Those parcels for that town have been updated within the last 6 months. As you fade into the sort of brownish colors, the data are older. So you can see there's sort of a smattering, at least, or over 50%, or almost 50% of towns have been updated in the last year, which is great. We generally recommend that towns do it on an annual basis. So again, it depends on the needs and the resources of the town, but an annual update is generally preferred. We can see that as we get to the updated over 3 years ago category, these are towns that have not been updated since the parcel project ended. So at least we have not received any data. That doesn't mean that they're not working with a vendor or doing updates themselves that we just don't have yet. But for the statewide data set that we publish, the parcels for those towns are at least 3 years old. Which is not terrible, but also not great. We hope that towns can kind of keep up a little bit more frequently with their updates, but again, it depends on their capacity. And anything with this sort of hash mark color are towns that have been updated by VCGI. So again, most of them fall into the category of having been updated within the last year, but that's because Chaveli and I spent some of last year and this year visiting, or not visiting physically, but looking through these towns and the Vermont Land Survey Library to see if there were any updates we could make on our end, so that we could at least hopefully publish some new updates, but maybe not all of them, and we'll see why that is shortly. I think that's all we have on this slide, but all this information and more is available at the Town Mapping Status app, which we can show you where that's located. It's right on our website, and we also have a booth in that main ballroom. If you want to come by and check it out, we can show you how to navigate to it and then the capabilities that you can find within. All right, so we're going to get more into surveys now. So we're going to talk through some of the main differences between parcel data and land surveys. So we'll start with parcels because this is a common question we get. What's the difference? What exactly is the parcel data set showing? The main objective of parcel data is to provide an index of property ownership. We made this disclaimer on our website and our parcel viewer that they are not intended to be official boundary lines. They're generalized and they're meant to be more of a reference and a way for you to check about properties, check brand list information that's associated with that parcel, but they're not necessarily intended to be precise. So if you're doing something like trying to validate a property line or using the acreage for tax assessment, that's not what the parcel data are intended to be. Land surveys, on the other hand, are official documents that can provide more precise measurements and information about the property. And since they're done by a licensed surveyor, they are considered official. They can show things like permanent features on the property, whether they are natural or man-made. They can give information about suitability, including zoning information. They often will include very precise topographic contours, and they may reference other existing surveys or deeds. So again, these are the legal means for determining or validating the property lines, and they reside with the town at the town office. So those are just primary differences, want to make sure we're very clear on the two because we definitely get quite a few questions about that. So really diving into the land survey library now. Why do we care? In 2020, effective on January 1st, there was some legislation passed that said surveys are required for property line changes, and the land surveyors who create these surveys are required to submit a digital copy to this digital library. So this is in statute, and VCGI is responsible for maintaining that library that is digital, freely, and publicly accessible. The official survey is then also filed with the town, and that's where it resides. So again, the survey library itself is not an official, is not the official document, but can be used as a reference to see those surveys and then be used with the town as well if you need additional information. So we're at our first poll, which is a very exciting transition here. So if you do have a smartphone with you and you can, and it's close enough that you can capture this QR code, try it out, see if you can get it. If not, you can also just go to this simple website, Slido, SLIDO.com, and type in this code, which I can read out if it's difficult for people to see. But we just have a pretty simple question, just trying to gauge people's familiarity with the survey library, because it's hard for us to tell sometimes exactly how much traffic it's getting and how people are using it. So I'm just going to open it up right here. For those of you that might not have a phone right now, that's totally fine. I'm not actually sharing this, but you can sort of see. All right, so it's not showing up on the screen for you, but I can see that you've got most people that have never heard of the library at all, or use it maybe 2 times a week. But the majority that I'm seeing right now, I was unaware of the library, so this is very helpful for us.
That's why you're here, right?
Yeah. This is really great. You came to the right section. Okay, so that's helpful. Hopefully today you learned some things. Great, thank you for doing that. Did that work pretty smoothly for most of you? Okay, cool. We have a couple more, so I asked. Okay, so let's take a look on what we are seeing in the land survey library. So as I mentioned, at the beginning of 2020, that was when it was required that any surveys done get submitted to the library. So since that time, we've seen almost 2,300 submissions. Most of them have come in 2022, we can see here. Surveyors are permitted and encouraged to submit surveys that were done prior to 2020, but that's not a requirement. We also like to emphasize that town officials, town clerks can also submit to the library. It does not have to be the surveyor themselves. So we want to give a shout out to our 2 towns that have submitted over 100 surveys, Londonderry and Mount Holly, have given a great number of submissions. The rest, as we can see on the map, anything in that sort of medium green is between 10 and 100, and then as the colors sort of fade out, they become fewer. Anything in white, which I know can be a little challenging to see right here, but for those towns we have not received any submissions. So it's not to say they haven't submitted to us. It could be the case there have been no surveys in the last 3 years. Seems unlikely, but just to highlight that.
So Dylan, is that,
yes.
so is there a requirement of the surveyors to submit to the state? That's
Correct.
They have to do that part of their job.
Yes.
But the town, I mean, we're not aware, the town's not aware if that survey's been submitted to the state. Is that, that's not something we would have access to once we look at this.
Yes, so we'll go into the library itself very soon, and then so you will be able to see if surveys are being submitted for your town. So that information is public. But yes, if you are working with a surveyor or receiving surveys for your town, definitely check with the surveyor and encourage them to submit it to the librray if they haven't already. So Jeremiah,
Just gonna piggyback on that, like, Do you have an idea of how many surveyors are not complying with that versus how many surveyors, like how many surveys are being done and how many are being uploaded? Because I think there's a great discrepancy between those two totals because the local surveyors that I have in my town are not going to do it. They've told me, I mean, basically not going to do it.
Right.
They don't want to share their work. So that's,
Yeah, I mean,
they don't directly say that, but they say, oh, that's not really a high priority
Getting
of
anything
ours.
done.
So
Yeah.
like, there's no like teeth, I believe, to that. So that, I don't know, that's what I'm seeing is everything new that comes in, I just submit.
yeah.
Yes, and thank you
Okay.
for doing that.
Is
But
there-
yeah, I don't think we have any sense really of what's not being submitted, other than seeing towns like Londonderry and Mount Holly with the number that they're submitting, assuming that's probably somewhat close to what other towns are doing, at least in some regard. So we might expect to see more than we're seeing right now, but we don't really have a way of knowing what's not being submitted.
So if, as those surveys come in, are they, how does that interact with like the user? Is that updating parcel data? Like, is it connecting directly with parcel data?
Not quite.
Okay.
We'll
Just-
get into all of that, don't you?
Oh, okay.
We got
Really
a whole
good questions.
demo.
Oh, good.
We got a whole demo.
These are really good
Yeah,
questions.
they're all great questions.
Yeah.
All very good questions.
Hopefully we'll answer that, but yeah, if we miss something that you're interested in, definitely bring it up at the end or after our session, we're happy to talk through it.
It'll show how many surveys.
But yeah, I mean, the main point here, I think, is that there's legislation that requires them to be submitted. We obviously encourage it, but there isn't really an enforcement mechanism, so we really rely on town officials to help us with that and to try and increase participation, but ultimately, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can actually do to make it happen. So hopefully there's some solutions there. We'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything here. I will just say the majority of surveys we're receiving, almost 40%, are just sort of general property surveys, so kind of site surveys. After that, 35% subdivisions, and then about a fifth are boundary line changes. So those are the kind of three main types that are being submitted. All right. Well, let's skip
I got a quick question.
No, there's
You
a
guys-
lot.
When you guys get the surveys, you're just collecting, you're just basically collecting the surveys in a library. You guys aren't mapping off of these, are you?
Well, so most of the time, no. The only time we would use a submission to help us with a geometry change is, as I mentioned at the beginning, those towns that don't have capacity to update their own parcels. That is our main resource that we would check to see if we can make any changes. And usually it's maybe a handful of surveys. As you notice, there aren't a ton for most towns. And most towns that might have more typically are working with a vendor. So it might be a dozen or fewer surveys that have even been submitted. So in those cases, we will look at them and we will try to make any tweaks to the geometry if we can. But beyond that, we're not using them.
Is there, so you guys will get like from CAI when I give us kids a dump and shake off and everything.
Right. In theory, the town, any surveys, if they're working with a vendor, the vendor will be receiving those
Right.
surveys and making those updates.
Has there been any thought about like reorganizing that and making you guys like putting a mapping element into it, so surveys come to you, you map, and there's authority on tax parcels?
Don't think so.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
that's all
there hasn't
our-
been conversation of that really.
Yeah, because it's like, some of these small towns don't do it, so why not centralize it, give it all in one group of maps?
Yeah,
I mean, everybody struggles, like, nobody has a map on staff, you know what I mean? Nobody has I mean, we did in Burlington for a little while, but now we're back up to 2018 because they quit and COVID and everything else, so,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I think it is definitely challenging for towns that aren't working with a vendor.
Yeah.
There's not many that do it themselves, and then after that, yes, we're kind of stuck with just whatever's in the survey library, and as we'll see, it's not always, as we've seen, it's not always the most complete, so. Yeah, I think with that, I'm gonna
Yeah.
toss this over to Chaveli to talk a little bit about.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, So I'm just gonna go over a few use cases. Obviously, the caveat that we kind of alluded to is with limited participation, there's limited use. So take these all with a grain of salt that, in the future, if we were to see an uptake in frequency of submissions, that some of these use cases could be more applicable. For example, we've kind of already touched on this together. Mapping vendors may be able to reference the library as part of a municipal parcel data update. This could make the workflow a little bit more efficient in the case that vendors would be able to cross-reference what they're receiving from the town and making sure that all sort of boundary line adjustments and subdivisions are being captured in a parcel update. Also, the library can be used for preliminary research when conducting a title search. Similarly, the library may also assist land surveyors in doing research prior to field work. And this is actually one of the biggest uses we see. One of our biggest users of the land survey library are actually other surveyors to do research. So that's pretty cool. This is a big one that could be helpful, again, if we do see an uptick in frequency of submissions, and particularly surveys at the town boundaries. It could help towns coordinate and collaborate to help address boundary discrepancies, especially if they're at the town boundaries. It's just another source of information for towns to be able to chat and create a little bit more clarity about where those town boundaries are. And lastly, this is kind of a bonus. Again, the only surveys that are required for the land survey library are surveys that are completed after January 1st, 2020. But it could be used to help create a digital copy of some older surveys. For example, the oldest survey currently submitted to the library is from 1924 in Mount Holly. So it's just kind of cool that we have access to that. So now I'm going to move on to a quick demo of the land survey library, and I'm going to take you through a mock submission. If you have any additional questions, again, we'll be at our booth during the cookie break. So if you want a little bit more insight into how to submit something to the land survey library, you can come visit us during that time. I may be a little clunky doing this because the screen is kind of far from me and I wear glasses. So let's see. Okay, so if you go to landsurvey.vermont.gov, it will take you to the homepage for the land survey library. And in addition to having some background information as well as contact information, this is also where you'll find our frequently asked questions section right down here at the bottom. So this is a really good resource if you just want to get a little bit of background information, since a lot of you are new to using the library. This is a great place to start. If I scroll all the way up to the top and I click this green button here, that'll take me to the actual application. Perfect. And there's a little disclaimer here. I'll go ahead and click OK. And a lot of the information that is on the home page is also mirrored on this side panel over here. So that'll give you, again, some basic ins and outs of using the land survey library. But let's go ahead and assume that I want to go ahead and submit a survey. I'm going to go to this little icon here. It's a little light bulb and pencil, says add a survey. I'm going to click that. And this will give you directions. And I'm going to go ahead and find the parcel that the survey is referencing, and I'm going to go ahead and search that by address. So I have my little cheat sheet here, so that's why I'm looking down. Oh, I'm not even typing anything. Come on. There we go.
And that cross-reference like span number,
Yep.
parcel ID, owner name.
So I think right now the best way to do it is by address. We were actually playing around with some of the capability, the search capabilities.
Some vacant parcels don't have physical
No,
address.
vacant parcels do. They won't give a 911 address until
Driveways put in.
most towns have until
Unfortunately,
Here's what they can land.
use your GIS or parcel viewer.
Come on, don't be finicky. There you go.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so the best way to do is by address. We will hopefully in the future, in a future iteration, be able to create better search functionality. That's actually something we'll chat about with the challenges section, which will be the next slide after this demo portion. So I went ahead and searched the parcel that the survey is referencing by address. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm basically just going to resubmit a survey that's already there just to show you guys. So as you can see, I found the parcel right here. And I'm going to take you through some additional functionality. You don't have to do all of this when you add a survey, but just to take you through the ins and outs of the app, I'm going to go ahead and show you. Let's say, for example, I want to get a rough estimation of the size of the parcel. I can go to this little ruler icon here, which is the measurement tool, and I can click this little icon here. It says area, and I can go to my parcel. And I'm just going to do single clicks all around the perimeter of my parcel. And then when I'm ready to complete the shape, I'm going to do a double click. And that'll just give you a rough estimation of the size of the parcel. And let's say I want to add a little bit more reference information. I can go right here to our layer list. And let's say I want to add address points. I can go ahead and do that, and they pop right up. And now let's say I want a little bit more contrast. Maybe I'm having trouble seeing the parcel lines. I want a base map that's going to create a little bit more contrast for me. So this is a two-step process. So I'm going to first untoggle the imagery layer that is currently being displayed on top of the base map. So I'm going to toggle that off. And then I can go to this More button right here, click that, and then click Base Map Gallery. And this will give you a collection of base maps to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and choose this one, the dark gray canvas. And that just gives me a lot more contrast to be able to clearly see the parcel lines when drawing the index polygon. So I'm going to go back to add a survey. And I'm going to go ahead and make my index polygon. Now the index polygon is just to create a sense of where the survey is. It doesn't have to perfectly follow the parcel lines. But if the survey itself is of the entire parcel, it makes sense just to make the index polygon the same shape as the parcel. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to click New Feature. It'll highlight, and then the functionality is very similar to the measurement tool. I'm going to do just single clicks around the perimeter of my parcel, and then a double click to finish. And I'm going to go ahead and type in the relevant attribute information. So this says survey title. I'm going to click demo. And I know that this survey was created by this surveyor. So I'm going to type that in. I'm the uploader, so I am going to go ahead and put my email down. And I think that's correct, maybe that's okay. And then the date of the survey. I'm going to go ahead and change that. Mm-hmm. 2021. Survey type. This is a subdivision. And you will notice that the town automatically populates, and the town will automatically be selected based on where you draw the index polygon. So that's something to be, something to note. If you were drawing the index polygon right on the town boundary, it might accidentally clip the neighboring town. And if that happens, you can just if you've already submitted it and you can't go back and edit it, you can just let us know and say, hey, this clipped to the wrong town, can you go ahead and change that, and we'll be happy to do that. And then for uploader, I'm going to change that, and I'm going to write VCGI. then for notes, I'm just gonna put demo again. Alright, so the last step to creating a submission is choosing the copy of the PDF of the survey. And where did you put it, Dylan? On desktop? Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna find it, just open it up, and just click save. And it's just like that. And then every submission is reviewed by VCGI prior to being officially published. So that's when we'll catch any sort of spelling mistakes, if the wrong town was clipped, if there, sometimes there won't be a PDF attachment, and we'll go ahead and email the uploader, and we'll say, hey, this submission doesn't include a copy of the survey as a PDF. If you could send us that via email, we'll go ahead and add it for you, and then we'll publish it to the library. So it's a pretty easy little process there. So,
Can I ask you a quick question?
yes,
And
definitely.
you don't have to show me this.
Okay. Yes.
If you have a survey that's multiple parcels,
Yeah.
and those multiple parcels may not be all the same parcel,
Mm-hmm.
one might be sold or conveyed and so on,
Yeah.
can you still, is there a feature to be able to put that multiple lot survey on there and still have it
Yeah.
identifying different lots? Or do you
Um,
have to do each lot like it's its own survey?
yeah, so if the survey, so basically base it off what the survey is. If the survey includes sort of the cumulative boundaries of all of the parcels, maybe just make your index polygon one big polygon to represent all of them. If you have separate surveys for individual lots, then you can upload them separately and just do like one index polygon per survey.
Okay.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
So our town has photographs of all our surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that would be useful to you? They're not, they're not the digitally correct, but they're pretty close.
Yeah.
I mean, they're great for research purposes and not legal
Right.
documents. But would that be something that would be?
Yeah, so that again, we'll kind of touch on in the challenges slide for more atypical submissions, sort of what's the best practice for that. I would say right now our recommendation is just like case by case basis. So we kind of have to like have that conversation and see sort of what the content is that you'd like to have potentially on the survey library, and then we can kind of make accommodations for how best to present that, or maybe if there's a better place for that information to go, we can have that discussion. So for submissions that you think might be included in the land survey library that are not sort of standard surveys, typically it's best to just have that conversation and take it by case basis. And that's mostly because the survey library was created for that very specific like legislative requirement. So doing anything beyond that requirement, there has to be like a little bit of an iterative process for that. Yeah. So yeah, that went through great. And then again, just some basic mechanics for the land survey library. If you're familiar with the parcel viewer, a lot of the functionality is the same. You can zoom in and out using the mouse wheel or the little plus and minus up here. You can go back to the full default of the map over here. Search bar, coordinates, an attribute table. Again, if you are familiar with working with the parcel viewer, this sort of format shouldn't be too foreign. Perfect. So let's hop back into the presentation.
Wait, can you
Yes.
just click on it, because that's the main part, is that the PDF is now on that parcel.
Sure, yeah.
Like, 'cause now you can just go back to this website whenever you want and see that survey that you uploaded.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's take a look.
So it's not changing any characteristics of the parcel, it's not changing, it's just basically, so that's where you can find, it's basically a place to find the survey.
It's indexed.
Right, right. So you can now search for any surveys that are uploaded.
So it's not,
Right.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. So that's a good point, yeah.
It's not changing the parcel, it's just showing where they are.
Yeah, so if you were to click on a parcel, you will see, so this actually represents the parcel that I just did as a demonstration. It says this survey has not yet been reviewed. That's because VCGI has to go in and approve every submission and then formally publish it to the library. So that's just an indication that your submission was successful. We just haven't reviewed it and published it yet. So this is, again, the pop-up window for the actual survey that was pre-existing that I based the demo on. So you can see it has pretty much the same information that I put in the demonstration. And then right down here, you can see attachments. If I go ahead and click on that, that'll pull up the PDF, and then you can go ahead and save that to your desktop. You can attach it to an email. You can potentially pull it into your GIS software if you have that capability. So there's many different functionalities with using that. This is a really great way, for example, if you need to find the official record at the town level, you can actually send this as an attachment in the email and say, hey, do you have this in the official records? And then they have all the information that they need to be able to find this. If you would like to learn more about this survey, the contact information for the submitter is already available in the pop-up window, so you can send them an email really easily and attach the PDF and say, hey, do you have more information about this survey? And then you can also see the parcel information if there is parcel information available as well. And then over here, I just scrolled down a little bit on this About tab, and you can see the different types of surveys are color-coded. So you can see over here. So that's a general property survey. Yeah. Perfect. So I think we were right here. So poll number 2 out of 3. So this is going to be like a short response form. So again, QR code if you're comfortable using that. If not, you can go to slido.com and type in this code. You're going to have the ability to write more than one response. We just ask that each response be sort of a discrete thought. Don't use multiple responses to craft like one long sentence, please. And the question is, in a word or two, what are some challenges or limitations you've experienced with the Vermont Land Survey Library? Since some of you have not had experience using the Land Survey Library, maybe just challenges or limitations working with surveys or integrating surveys with parcel data, sort of along the lines of those. And let's see, I'm just going to add search functions. So that one's mine, so ignore that one. So just a few responses so far. Looks like maybe some navigation, which maybe kind of echoes my little mock search function response. Seems like maybe some, mostly like capability challenges, and then a first-time user who maybe just isn't familiar with the platform yet. Perfect. You guys should be able to keep seeing responses as they come in, but I'm just going to go ahead and pivot back to the presentation because we have one more slide. Since you guys shared some of your challenges, we're just going to go ahead and share some of the challenges that we have identified. The first one being what we've kind of alluded to throughout this presentation, which is inconsistent participation, which could be for a number of different reasons. We've only listed a few here. I'm sure you guys have thoughts or perspectives on what some other limitations may be. And again, just to reiterate, the legislative requirement is put on land surveyors, but town officials, town clerks, listers, assessors, you all are also welcome to submit surveys to the Land Survey Library as well. Number 2, so we definitely know there are going to be some user experience issues with the Land Survey app, particularly with sort of capabilities, searching functions. For one thing, we don't really have any guidance on standard naming conventions, so that can make it really hard to search by title, or even land surveyor name. If they're typing in their name different ways each time, it can be hard to find all the surveys for a particular surveyor if they're using, you know, a nickname one day and then like their full official name the next day. So things like that.
So on that,
Mhm.
as much as I've been a lister for so long and I hate the span number, obviously we have to have a state number that identifies the parcel. So when we're entering in, or whoever's that survey information, if that went with a primary span number, then it really wouldn't matter what survey did it or what the address is, because you know the parcel you're looking for, and
Right.
that's the number.
Yeah, that's definitely one option. One of the potential challenges is not every parcel is assigned a span for various different reasons. So even with that solution, there are always going to be caveats, but I think taking sort of like a multifaceted approach where you can maybe search by survey title, span, address, basically having all of those capabilities be robust is probably the best solution. But unfortunately, the software itself is just not at that capability point, so it's really a software limitation right now for some of this stuff. Number 3, so this was touched on, lack of clarity with some more unique submissions, atypical submissions. The bullet points we listed were actual conversations we had with individuals asking if they could submit, for example, surveys of proposed subdivisions that were never actually completed, as well as surveys that are more difficult to read. Maybe they're older, hand-drawn, things like that. And typically, again, we've taken this by a case-by-case basis and just tried to work with that individual to come up with a solution for that. That workflow is not very efficient, especially if we were to see like an uptick in submissions. That workflow is not very viable, but for right now, that is what we're doing. This was also touched on, discrepancies with parcel data. Because parcel data and the land survey library are maintained independently, there are going to be ultimately discrepancies. And those discrepancies will always exist, but they will be more pronounced with towns that have not updated their parcel data in a while. So that's really just something to note. And then lastly, I kind of just talked about sort of workflow efficiency. If we were to see a higher frequency of submissions, the current workflows that we have, which are more manual, so kind of like email-based, like, hey, you forgot to include your PDF attachment, should you send that to me and I can upload it? That type of workflow just would not work if we were seeing a very high volume of submissions. So that's just something to think about in the future. So very last poll question. Again, same format. This question is, in a word or two, what would help facilitate use of the Vermont Land Survey Library or land surveys in general if you previously have not been familiar with the Land Survey Library, or what additional resources would be helpful when working with land surveys? And we'll go ahead and this, and then and I'm just going to say
I have time to write the number in.
We can also open this up to discussion.
Yes, I will say this poll concludes our presentation, so thank you all for listening, and we will go ahead and open it up if you guys have any questions. Yeah, Jeremiah and then Lisa.
Tag on to
Yeah.
this, I think, like, so a big challenge, once the town of Londonderry got a wide format scanner, that
Mhm.
became a possibility. Otherwise, it was kind of stitching PDF files, and that's just
Right.
not gonna happen.
Yeah, the workflow efficiency aspect.
And then on the other side of that, I was wondering, does any town, like if I talk to the zoning administrator, since it's statute, On a subdivision, I could put a requirement that the PDF must be submitted to the land survey library, and that would, in order for it to be submitted and accepted in a subdivision.
Yeah.
And that would just, like you're talking about, the manual process,
Mm-hmm.
and that would automate that
Right.
to some level, to put it back onto the surveyor, which he's supposed to be doing anyway.
Yeah, towns with zoning it should be a no-brainer.
That would actually be interesting to do a comparison of like towns that have zoning and their submission count and kind of doing that comparison. Be interesting.
We're in the 2 to 5 submission.
Lisa?
Yeah, we're not, yeah.
Yeah, I have kind of a logistical question.
Sure.
So, looking at what happens, so I'm the property owner, I have a 5-lot subdivision, and I have a survey for those 5 lots. I filed that in 2022. By 2024, all 5 of those lots have been subdivided off of it and are separate parcels.
Right.
Where is that data going to go with those new parcels? Or would I have to find it under the original span? Which would probably be on one of those parcels.
The surveys or like the boundary lines?
Well, both. I'm presuming if you're uploading parcel data, it's gonna have the 5 new lots with their 5 new parcel data.
Right.
But where's the survey gonna be linked to? To all 5 of them in an ideal world? Because I don't know if you
Yeah.
know to do that.
Yeah, so the boundary line updates would hopefully come, in most cases, with the vendor update with the next submission. And then the land survey library submissions would come on a separate track, ideally by those surveyors that are conducting those surveys on their timeline as they're able to submit them to the library. So they're gonna come on 2 separate timelines.
It's difficult to reconcile.
Yes, that's where the discrepancies with the parcel data comes in, and yeah, trying to find harmony, and there's always gonna be that sort of timeline issue, even within parcel data, because the grand list is right now updated annually, and then the parcel geometry is on a rolling basis. So we're working with like 5 or 6 different timelines for, you know, working with different towns, and yeah. But it's a good thing to note, definitely. Yes.
To that point, like you can layer, like I could have 20 surveys on one parcel. So like I might start out here, and so on the map you'll have one, and each one subsequently, like, so like it's not just one, so I don't know how to describe it, but like you could have 5 surveys of the same parcel and link them all on
And you
that.
can see the history by the colors.
Yeah,
Color
you can
the
see all
layers.
5 PDF files, so like you could review all 5 surveys at this, I don't know how to. So geometry, it's linked to the polygon on their
Yes.
side.
There'll be an index polygon, and you should hopefully be able to see the record.
I confess I haven't played with it yet.
Well, please do, please do. Yeah, so I think we have 2 minutes, right? So if there's any final questions, if there's any sort of additional questions, again, cookie break, come visit us. If you have any additional questions, yes.
Just the last thing, like I'm using it specifically for an index to a parcel, so I'm indexing. So I think that's the biggest value for listers, is to say to the surveyor, to the real estate agent, no, just go to the, like what I have scanned is on the land survey library.
Yeah,
Start there, if you want to know if there's a survey on the property, go there. Because they
perfect,
can
yeah.
usually find the geometry
Yeah.
of their own parcel.
Yeah,
Instead of looking through
exactly.
the vault trying to find this survey in a random file.
Yeah, it's sort of a first preliminary step to sort of a digitization of land records. It's kind of, you know, it's not supposed to be in lieu of sort of a local level digitization project, if that's what the town is interested in, but it can kind of help supplement what a town is already doing. I think that's, at least from a lister perspective, how we kind of envision it being used. Yeah. Well, again, thank you all for joining.